You're watching a movie and slowly realize that the filmmakers have just taken everything you loved about the original and completely ruined it forever. This sequel is so aggressively bad, so fundamentally awful, that it actually makes you hate the first movie, the one that was first in the sequel that you once loved. Let me explain this phenomena better with a few examples. Let's start with Scary Movie from 2000. So the original Scary Movie was actually pretty clever. It was a smart parody that knew exactly what it was mocking. The Wayans brothers created a film that perfectly captured the absurdity of late 90s horror movies while still being genuinely funny. The movie was made on a very modest $19 million budget. But then came the sequels. Scary Movie 2, Scary Movie 3, Scary Movie 4, and the horrific Scary Movie 5. And each one got progressively worse. The clever parody elements were replaced with cheap slapstick and very crude jokes. The Wayans brothers left the franchise after the second film, and honestly, it showed. And by the time Scary Movie 5 limped into theaters in 2013, audiences had completely turned on the franchise. But here's where it gets tragic. The endless stream of terrible sequels made people forget how good the original one was. The sequels were so bad that they retroactively poisoned the original. Today, when people think of Scary Movie, they don't remember the decent original. They remember the franchise as a whole, and that franchise, in my humble opinion, is terrible. Next, let's talk about Police Academy from 1984. The original Police Academy was harmless fun. Steve Guttenberg led a cast of misfits going through police training with plenty of slapstick comedy and surprisingly good chemistry between the characters. Okay, so it wasn't sophisticated, but it worked, and people loved it. The movie was made on a tiny $4.5 million budget. And you know what? It was a commercial success, grossing nearly $150 million worldwide. Then came Police Academy 2, which made $115 million worldwide, showing the brand was already starting to lose a little of its magic. But of course, all Hollywood could see were dollar signs. And if one Police Academy movie could make that much money, why not make more? So they did. Police Academy 3, Back in Training. Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. Police Academy 5, Assignment Miami Beach. Police Academy 6, City Under Siege. Police Academy, Mission to Moscow. And the sequels just kept coming. By 1994, they had made 7 Police Academy movies. 7. Each one was lazier and more formulaic than the last. The characters became caricatures of themselves. The jokes became repetitive and tired. And the audience? Exhausted. The endless sequels just took people further and further away from the original Police Academy that had been loved by so many. But that original movie is now entangled with the juvenile humor, one-note characters, and lazy storytelling from the sequels. Today, Police Academy is remembered as a symbol of 80s excess, and Hollywood's willingness to milk a concept dry until audiences finally walk away with exhaustion. The sequels didn't just fail. They destroyed the legacy of what was once a beloved comedy. Now we need to discuss Final Destination from 2000. The original Final Destination had a genuinely brilliant concept. A group of teenagers cheat death, only to be hunted down one by one in increasingly elaborate ways. The film was made on a $23 million budget and grossed $112.9 million worldwide. It was smart, suspenseful, and it was surprisingly creative too. Audiences loved the concept of death as an invisible force. The elaborate death sequences were genuinely shocking and innovative. At the time, it felt like a fresh take on the teen horror genre. But then the sequel started coming. Final Destination 2, Final Destination 3, The Final Destination, Final Destination 5. Each one followed the exact same formula. Group cheats death, death hunts them down, and they each get killed, one by one. And what made the original creative became a tired formula in the sequels. The inventive death sequences became increasingly ridiculous and over the top. The suspense was replaced with gore, lots of gore. And the smart concept became a parody of itself. By the time the Final Destination hit theaters in 2009, audiences were completely tired of the franchise. It took another decade and a half before Final Destination Bloodlines came out in 2025. And its $187 million gross on a $40 million budget means that, yes, still has an audience, which unfortunately means that Hollywood will keep making more of these movies. But for fans of the original movie like me, it's hard to remember the brilliance of the first movie, because that has been overshadowed by the franchise. And this franchise has become everything that is wrong with modern horror films. Formulaic, repetitive, and full of endless jump scares that you can see coming a mile away. And for many, it's hard to see the original Final Destination as anything more than the beginning of a franchise that has overstayed its welcome. Let's move on to American Pie from 1999. The original American Pie was a surprisingly heartfelt coming-of-age comedy. Sure, it had plenty of raunchy humor, but underneath all the crude jokes was a genuine story about friendship and growing up. The movie struck a chord with audiences and became a cultural phenomenon. It launched the careers of several young actors and proved that R-rated comedies could be both commercially successful and emotionally resonant. People connected with the characters and their awkward journey into adulthood. But then Hollywood decided to turn American Pie into a franchise. American Pie 2, American Wedding, American Reunion, plus a series of direct-to-video spin-offs that had nothing to do with the original characters or story. The sequels focused more and more on the crude humor while losing the heart that made the original special. The characters became one-dimensional joke machines. The genuine emotion was replaced with increasingly desperate attempts at shock humor. By the time American Reunion hit theaters in 2012, the franchise had completely lost its way. The movie tried to recapture the magic of the original by bringing back the original cast, but it only served to highlight how far the series had fallen. And it just highlighted how the endless sequels and spin-offs made the original feel less special. Today, American Pie is remembered more for its terrible sequels than its decent original. And the franchise is synonymous with lazy shockbait comedy. Now let's talk about The Mummy. The original 1999 film starring Brendan Fraser was genuinely entertaining. It was a fun adventure movie with great chemistry between the leads, impressive practical effects, and a perfect balance of action and humor. The movie was a massive hit and seemed to set up a successful franchise. But then came The Mummy Returns in 2001, which, yes, made money, but it was nowhere near as good as the original, and you could tell it was a rushed cash grab that was banking on the success of the first movie. But then things got worse. In 2008, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor was the sequel that no one asked for. And this sequel was so bad that it killed the entire franchise from a creative perspective. Brendan Fraser looked bored, the action sequences were uninspired, and the whole production felt like it was just going through the motions. But it made $405 million worldwide and a $145 million budget. So you already know Hollywood is going to keep this money machine running no matter how broken it gets. And that's exactly what they did. In 2017, they rebooted the franchise with Tom Cruise and a film that was supposed to launch Universal's Dark Universe. But this time, audiences had enough. This movie had a production budget of about $125 million and earned around $409 million at the worldwide box office. But when you add the large advertising budget of about $150 million, the total cost comes to about $275 million. So, despite its worldwide earnings, it actually needed about $550 million to break even on top of the marketing costs, because studios only get to keep about half of the box office earnings. The commercial disaster, that was one thing, but the creative disaster, that was another. Moviegoers hated this film. It currently sits at around 35% on the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. But here's the real problem. The constant attempts to revive and reboot The Mummy made people forget what was actually good about the original. The fun adventure elements were lost in a sea of failed sequels and reboots. Today, when people think of The Mummy, they're more likely to remember Tom Cruise's terrible reboot or the awkward Scorpion King timeline, and not Brendan Fraser's genuinely fun and entertaining original movie. But by far the worst franchise that has made me come to hate an original movie that I once loved is the Saw franchise. Where do we even start with this one? So here's the thing. The original Saw from 2004 was a genuinely clever thriller. It was a low-budget film that relied on smart writing and genuine suspense rather than gore. And then, the twist ending was brilliant, and the concept of moral tests was actually thought-provoking. So, yes, there were one or two obvious plot holes. But it proved that horror movies could be both commercially successful and intellectually engaging. Saw was made on a tiny budget and became a massive hit. The film launched careers and established a new subgenre of horror. But then, the sequels started coming. Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4, 5, 6, 7, Saw 3D, Saw 10, Jigsaw. I mean, it just never stopped. But they also became increasingly focused on elaborate torture sequences, rather than the smart storytelling that made the original special. The moral complexity of the original was replaced with insanely sadistic scenarios. The clever plot twists became convoluted and ridiculous, and the character of Jigsaw became a cartoon villain rather than the complex antagonist from the first film. And, well, the series has become everything that critics hate about modern horror films. Over-the-top violence, needlessly sadistic, and completely lacking in genuine scares. Just really annoying and ridiculously obvious jump scares. And what's interesting is that what made the first one so good wasn't the gore or elaborate torture set pieces, but the genuinely engaging plot and storytelling. In fact, there was very little to no gore in the first movie. The horror came from the clever setup and relatable scenario. I mean, it's not hard to imagine waking up in a strange place and not knowing how you got there and why you're there, right? But honestly, the endless sequels make it so hard to appreciate the original movie on its own merit, and makes it almost impossible to remember why I even enjoyed it so much in the first place.